Our first video takes us to the 5100 block of Houston, Texas. The date was May 16th, 2025. A calm evening that would turn violent in a matter of mere minutes. Police were dispatched to the area following a 911 call about an armed robbery in progress. The suspect, who would later be identified as 33-year-old Ernest Duke Harrison, had reportedly stolen merchandise and threatened store employees while brandishing a weapon. Witnesses described the encounter as tense, with Harrison allegedly waving the weapon around and making direct threats before fleeing the scene. As officers canvassed the area, they spotted a man matching Harrison's description near the Southmore Boulevard Bridge. What followed was a confrontation that would quickly spiral into a deadly encounter. A female officer was the first to make contact. Dashcam and bodycam footage would later show her issuing multiple, clear, verbal commands, instructing the suspect to stop and drop his weapon. But Harrison didn't comply. Instead, he continued moving quickly toward the officer, still clutching the weapon used in the robbery just moments earlier. With the situation escalating by the second and the suspect refusing to obey commands, the officer made a split-second decision. She drew her duty pistol and fired a single shot. The round struck Harrison and he collapsed instantly. He was still breathing when paramedics arrived and was rushed to a nearby hospital in critical condition. For several days, doctors worked to stabilize him, but their efforts ultimately failed. Ernest Duke Harrison was pronounced dead on Tuesday, May the 20th. This footage, and the situation leading up to it, raises tough questions about compliance, force, and the razor-thin margin officers operate within when lives are on the line. It also serves as a chilling reminder, in moments of crisis, one decision, one step, and one refusal to comply can be the difference between life and death.
Our next incident takes us to Phoenix, Arizona, specifically near 25th Street and Cactus Road. It was May 25th, 2025. The time was 2:27 p.m. when a routine traffic stop quickly escalated into a life-threatening encounter. Bodycam footage shows a Phoenix police officer initiating the stop. As the officer steps out of his patrol vehicle, he's immediately met with hostility. The man behind the wheel is confrontational, agitated, and demanding to know why he's been pulled over. The officer calmly explains the reason for the stop, but the man refuses to cooperate. He won't present his driver's license, and instead begins to shout, demanding to speak with the officer's supervisor. Tension builds by the second. The man's body language becomes more aggressive, stepping toward the officer, puffing out his chest, and clenching his fists. Sensing the growing threat, the officer radios for backup. But before the additional units can arrive, the situation explodes. The suspect lunges at the officer, striking him in the head. A violent struggle breaks out in the middle of the street. According to the investigation, the man tried to grab the officer's holstered firearm. In that instant, with his own weapon at risk of being turned against him, the officer made a split-second decision and fired. A nearby witness, recording the confrontation from across the road, captured a remarkable moment. A passerby runs toward the scene, putting himself in danger to assist the officer, and trying to pull the suspect off during the brawl. Once the suspect was subdued, additional officers arrived and immediately began administering medical aid. A tourniquet was applied to the man's leg before Phoenix fire personnel transported him to a nearby hospital. Miraculously, his injuries were deemed non-life-threatening. The officer, however, didn't walk away unscathed. He sustained multiple injuries during the attack and was also transported to the hospital, where he was treated and released later that day. The suspect was released from the hospital the following morning and promptly booked in the Maricopa County Jail. This incident serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly routine traffic stops can turn volatile, and how officers, in a matter of seconds, are forced to make choices that will follow them for the rest of their lives. Moments like these underscore the thin line between order and chaos, and the very real risks taken by those tasked with maintaining it.
Our next video takes place in Austin, Texas, in the 1700 block of West William Cannon Drive. The date was May 17th, 2025. It was just before 10 a.m. when multiple 911 calls flooded in, reporting a man in a wheelchair blocking traffic and waving a pistol at passing vehicles. Some callers claimed the man, later identified as 39-year-old Danny Palomino, not only waved the gun around, but pointed it directly at them. The situation was clearly volatile, and the potential for tragedy was growing by the second. Officer Jackson was the first to arrive on the scene at 9:53 a.m. His bodycam footage, what you're about to see, captures a tense, rapidly evolving encounter. As Jackson exits his patrol vehicle, he immediately spots Palomino in the middle of the street, waving what appears to be a black handgun. The officer, armed with a long rifle, begins giving clear, repeated commands for Palomino to drop the weapon. But Palomino doesn't comply. Instead, he begins to slowly roll eastbound, away from the officer, ignoring all commands. Officer Jackson continues to follow him on foot, his voice steady but urgent. You can hear him directing bystanders to move away from the area, trying to prevent further danger. As other officers rush to the scene, Palomino suddenly stops and returns to face Officer Jackson. The tension in the footage becomes unbearable.
Put your hands up!
Jackson shouts. But instead of surrendering, Palomino raises the black pistol and points it directly at the officer. At 9:56 a.m., Officer Jackson fires his weapon. Palomino slumps over in his wheelchair, an object covering his head falling to the pavement. But then, Palomino sits back up, still holding the gun. Jackson again orders him to drop it, but Palomino doesn't respond. Officer Jackson fires another shot. This time, Palomino falls from his wheelchair to the ground, still clutching the gun in his hand. Officers cautiously move in, disarm him, and begin rendering aid. He's rushed to South Austin Hospital, where he's later pronounced deceased. The firearm Palomino had been waving, what triggered such a deadly response, was later discovered to be a Glock-style BB gun. What makes this incident especially heartbreaking is the possibility that it was an intentional act of suicide by cop. Everything from Palomino's refusal to comply, to the confrontation with armed officers, to the decision to raise a weapon at law enforcement, suggests he may have wanted this outcome. And that's what makes this so deeply tragic. It's not just about the loss of one life. It's about the mental state that led him there, and the irreversible impact it leaves on everyone involved. Officer Jackson, who had to make a split-second life-or-death decision, will likely carry the weight of this moment forever. And so will the bystanders who witnessed it, and so will the family members of Danny Palomino, who may never fully understand why. This incident is a grim reminder of how mental health struggles can spiral until they explode into crisis. It's a reminder that behind every confrontation, every body cam video, is a complex human story. And sometimes, no matter how prepared the response, the outcome is heartbreak. If you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of self-harm or suicide, please reach out. Help is out there, and you're not alone.
Our next incident takes place in Franklin Township, Ohio, on the evening of May 29th, 2025, just after 6 p.m. What began as a routine speed enforcement operation on I-75 quickly escalated into a high-stakes pursuit. Ohio State Highway Patrol troopers were monitoring traffic when a speeding GMC Envoy caught their attention. The driver, later identified as 38-year-old Jennifer Wilson, was clocked at 82 miles per hour in a 65 zone. When troopers signaled for her to pull over, Wilson made a choice that would take this from a simple traffic stop to a chaotic scene of destruction. Instead of stopping, Wilson continued driving, refusing to comply. For several tense minutes, she sped forward, her SUV weaving between lanes as patrol cruisers followed in pursuit. Then, without warning, Wilson veered sharply off the road. Whether it was panic or reckless desperation, she overcorrected. A fatal mistake. Her SUV rolled violently, flipping multiple times before crashing to a halt in the grassy median. Metal twisted, glass shattered. The vehicle lay mangled, silent and still. First responders were dispatched immediately, but it wasn't the flashing red and blue lights that reached her first. It was a passing nurse who had witnessed the wreck and pulled over to render aid. Miraculously, Wilson sustained only minor injuries. She was transported to a nearby hospital before being taken into custody. But the story didn't end with the crash. As investigators dug deeper, a darker thread began to unravel. Wilson wasn't just speeding. She was allegedly under the influence at the time of the crash. And more disturbing, OSHP linked her to a hit-and-run incident reported earlier that same day in neighboring Montgomery County. Now, Jennifer Wilson faces a growing list of charges: operating a vehicle under the influence, failure to comply with lawful orders, reckless operation, and leaving the scene of a crash. It's another stark example of how one reckless decision can snowball into a nightmare. How a refusal to stop, to own up, can spiral into destruction in seconds. And for those on the roads that day, it's a reminder that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it comes barreling down the freeway at 82 miles per hour.
The next video is one of the most chilling encounters captured on Bodycam, and it could have ended in complete tragedy. On the morning of January 24th, 2025, at around 11 a.m., the Fountain Valley Police Department received a call that would quickly escalate into a life-or-death struggle. The caller, a concerned local resident, reported a disturbing incident near San Mateo Street and El Corazon Avenue in Fountain Valley, California. According to the caller, a shirtless male, described as either white or Hispanic, wearing jeans, had approached a car occupied by a woman who was just leaving a nearby middle school. The man tried to open her car door and the woman looked terrified. The caller added that the man seemed mentally unstable, saying something was clearly wrong with him. Officers were dispatched to the area moments later. One officer spotted a man matching the description near Brookhurst Street and Slater Avenue. The man was later identified as 26-year-old O'Shawn McClintock. When the officer attempted to engage him, asking him to sit down for questioning, McClintock refused, then suddenly bolted. A tense foot pursuit followed through multiple parking lots, but McClintock managed to gain distance, and the officer called off the chase, reporting his location over the radio. But just minutes later, chaos erupted. Another officer, the first to encounter McClintock, heard his partner, a female officer, screaming over the radio. He sprinted toward her location. What he had arrived to was the beginning of a nightmare. The female officer had been inside her patrol vehicle when McClintock approached her from the outside. Without warning, he reached through the window and grabbed her service weapon. A desperate struggle ensued. Bodycam footage captures the horrifying moment McClintock overpowered the officer, ripping the firearm from her hands. And all the while, he repeated the same haunting phrase over and over.
Say the Jesus name!
He said it like a mantra, like a trance, detached from reality but dangerously fixated. Now armed and unpredictable, McClintock walked away from the vehicle, ignoring the repeated commands of the male officer who had just arrived. Then, he did the unthinkable. He climbed into the driver's seat of the female officer's patrol vehicle and shut the door behind him. At that moment, an officer-involved shooting occurred. Within seconds, paramedics from the Fountain Valley Police Department were called to the scene. Once the area was deemed secure, officers removed McClintock from the patrol car and immediately began life-saving measures, administering chest compressions and rescue breaths. But the damage was already done. McClintock was pronounced dead a short time later. What makes this incident especially terrifying isn't just the speed at which it escalated, but how narrowly it missed becoming a double tragedy. The female officer was physically overpowered, had her service weapon stolen, and was vulnerable in those critical seconds. If not for the swift response of her partner and the ability to regain control of the situation, this could have easily become a fatal ambush. She could have been killed with her own weapon. The streets of Fountain Valley came within inches of a devastating headline. What's even more unsettling is McClintock's mental state. His repetition of religious phrases in the middle of a violent act. It's a chilling reminder of how unpredictable and dangerous encounters with mentally unstable individuals can be, especially when weapons are involved. For officers on the street, there's never a routine day. A simple call can spiral into madness in seconds, and this video is a harrowing example of just how fast it can happen.
And finally, the last encounter brings us to a heartbreaking and deeply unsettling moment out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. On February 16, 2025, deputies from the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office responded to an emergency call that would shake even the most seasoned officers. Two young boys, just 7 and 9 years old, were reported to be armed with a loaded firearm. That's not a typo. Not teens, not young adults. Children, barely out of kindergarten, holding a real gun. As the deputies arrived on scene, their body cams captured a scene that can only be described as surreal and tragic. Panic and disbelief fill their voices as they attempt to reason with the children. One deputy pleads, "Put the gun down on the ground. You're not in trouble." Another urgently reminds them, "This isn't a game. We're trying to help you." Despite their training and professionalism, you can hear the tension in every word. These aren't suspects, they're kids. But they're also holding a weapon capable of killing someone in an instant. In a bid to de-escalate, deputies deployed a non-lethal projectile toward the boys. A calculated decision meant to startle rather than harm. But in the chaos, one of the children briefly raised the gun toward the officers. In that split second, everything hung in the balance. Imagine being in that position. You're trained to neutralize threats, to protect the public, and to survive. But how do you point your weapon at a child? How do you make that decision in less than a heartbeat? Thankfully, the standoff didn't end in bloodshed. The children, terrified and overwhelmed, eventually surrendered the firearm. Deputies rushed in and took control of the scene. No shots were fired. No one was hurt. But the emotional toll? That lingers. The Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office has yet to explain how the boys came to possess a loaded weapon. How something so dangerous ended up in the hands of children, barely old enough to ride a bike unsupervised.